Good to see you. I know we've been apart for a little while. I hope you all at home had a wonderful holiday as well.
I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to start this hour, as we mentioned, in Japan with two major stories. So first, breaking news. A deadly collision between a passenger jet and a Japanese Coast Guard plane. The jet bursting into flames as it landed in Tokyo. All 5 crew members on the Coast Guard plane were reportedly killed, and the pilot was critically injured. All 400 people on board the jet were able to make it off safely.
We're also following the latest on yesterday's major earthquake in Japan, which killed more than 45 people. Rescuers have been dispatched along that country's west coast near Suzu. People there are still feeling the effects of yesterday's magnitude 7.6 quake. It was so powerful, tremors could be felt 190 miles away in Tokyo. The quakes left a considerable amount of destruction behind, leveling buildings, burying people underneath the rubble, and knocking out power. A huge fire broke out in the city of Wajima. The city's hospital says it's treating several people there for disaster-related injuries. Tsunami warnings were in place for hours after the quakes, forcing thousands to seek higher ground. Those warnings have since been downgraded. We want to get the latest on all this from NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald.
Guys, good morning. There was an emergency just hours ago on the runway in Tokyo. A passenger aircraft bursting into flames at Haneda Airport. The plane collided with another aircraft that's operated by Japan's Coast Guard. That's according to a Coast Guard spokesperson. But all of the nearly 400 people on that passenger plane are safe. Japan's transport minister now confirming that 5 passengers on board the Coast Guard flight have died. The pilot is the only survivor. This all seemingly unrelated to the series of earthquakes that have just rocked Japan. First responders are desperately looking for survivors this morning as the death toll on Japan's western coast passes 45 after a series of earthquakes, including a magnitude 7.6 that struck Monday afternoon. The quake violently shook train platforms and houses, sparking a massive fire that burned for hours. But as the sun came up today across the region, we saw the scope of the devastation. Homes and buildings flattened, private roads and streets buckled, cutting off access to people trapped on the other side. Some neighbors returning to their homes to get a first look at what's left. But guys, right now, it really is a race against time to try and rescue those people who are still trapped beneath the rubble of houses and buildings. Guys.
All right, Megan, thank you so much.
Now let's get to the race for the White House, where 2 states have now ruled that Donald Trump is ineligible to run for president of the United States.
Maine is the second state to remove the former president from the ballot over his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. This comes after Colorado's decision to also exclude Trump from the ballot, with both states disqualifying him from the presidency under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Trump's campaign now says it plans to appeal both states' decisions.
We've got NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos here to kick off the new year with us. Danny, good morning. Great to have you with us. So let's start, though, with the latest on what Joe had just mentioned here, which is the fact that there are these 2 states. However, it's sort of on pause for right now. He will be on the ballot for the GOP presidential primary as this legal process plays out. But take us back to what Joe mentioned about the 14th Amendment. What do we need to know about this Section 3 under the 14th Amendment that makes this possible?
There are a couple core issues, but those issues are just 2 of many, many issues that surround Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Here's what I mean. In both Colorado and Maine, you have a similar conclusion where Colorado concluded via courts that Donald Trump, number 1, was an insurrectionist, and number 2, is an officer within the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and therefore he must be removed from the ballot. And from a distance, those 2 issues appear in both Maine and Colorado, and it might seem reasonable to think, okay, well, the Supreme Court can decide these 2 discrete issues, but there are so many more issues, any of which will, if decided the right way, will go in favor of Donald Trump remaining on the ballot. Let me just give you an example. As much as Maine and Colorado look similar, and those are only 2 out of 50 states, Maine's decision came solely through an administrative process. Colorado's went through the courts. It's entirely possible the court could conclude that this is an issue that can't even be decided by the courts. That, in other words, it's committed to the executive branch or maybe the legislative branch. In that case, the Colorado decision is no good, and the Maine decision would be decided correctly because it went through the executive process. That's just one of many examples of ways that Donald Trump could remain on the ballot. So While it's easy to look at this as really two issues under Section 3, there are many other constitutional and state law issues that could come up.
So Trump has not been federally charged or convicted with insurrection. What factor does that have if this does go up to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I've heard that argument, too. That is yet another argument that the Trump team could make that, hey, I needed to be convicted. But it's one of the weakest arguments, and here's why. If you look at the text of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it doesn't appear to require a criminal conviction at all. It just speaks of insurrection. But then that raises another thorny issue. OK, we know that it doesn't require a criminal conviction. But what does it require? What is required in order to determine that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist? Is it an evidentiary hearing in a trial court like happened in Colorado? Or is it a hearing like the Secretary of State conducted in Maine? And then if Maine followed its own law and Colorado followed its own law, and those two laws are different, like they're different in every state out of 50, then how do you decide or even consider these to be similar issues?
Obviously, Trump plans to appeal both these decisions. He's saying without evidence, national Democrats are behind these decisions. Still, I mean, he does have some pretty good arguments for an appeal. What are his main arguments here, do you think?
The exact ones that he raised in both Maine and Colorado. I am not an insurrectionist. The stronger argument might be I'm not an officer within Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which it's strange. When you look at it, it mentions the vice president, it mentions all these other positions. It excludes the word president. Now, both sides have argued that an exclusion means the president isn't included. The other side says, oh, well, it sort of means, officers in general, they presume that the president was included. Another example might be the courts that might say, look, this isn't even ripe. This issue isn't even on time to get in front of us. They may decide that courts can't hear this case in the first place. There are a number of different reasons that Donald Trump could stay on the ballot, because all of these things need to go one way for Trump to be removed from the ballot. And that's why, by the way, the majority of states that have considered it have kept Trump on the ballot, and the ones that have removed him have kept him on the ballot pending appeal. So if you're just betting, no matter what side you're on, if you're just betting, the odds so far appear to be in favor of Trump staying on the ballot.
All right, Danny Cevallos, as always, thank you.
And while Donald Trump maintains a commanding polling lead in the upcoming New Hampshire Republican primary, there is still one group that is up for grabs for the other candidates, the undecided voter. And they do have a voice in the Granite State. NBC's Emma Barnett spoke to some of those primary voters who are still making up their minds.
So I know you ladies have a group chat, but is there a name?
Oh, well, we like to think of ourselves as the First in the Nation friends, because that's how we became friends. If it wasn't for the First in the Nation primary, we wouldn't have met.
First in the nation. First in the nation.
These three women have become close friends, participating in what New Hampshire's known for, politics.
What makes the First in the Nation primary so special?
The incredible access to the candidates. When the candidates recognize you, you know that you've been to a lot of their events.
Marie, Thalia, and Hella have attended dozens of town halls similar to this one, where they get to meet presidential candidates face to face.
They know how consequential this election is, and they take their role as early primary voters very seriously. That's why all these ladies are registered as undeclared voters in the state, meaning they can choose to vote in the Democratic or Republican primary. Thalia and Hella just changed their registration from Democrat to undeclared this cycle.
The whole point was to stop Trump and make sure he's not the nominee. So that was the impetus for changing my affiliation.
Is this your first time voting in a Republican primary in the state?
Yes. Yep.
Of course, they're three of many voters, but their mentality is similar to a lot of others I've talked to in the state. The big question is, do their views signal a broader trend, a potential liability for the former president and current frontrunner?
If you don't get out and vote, we can put this to bed.
The polls show Trump miles ahead of Nikki Haley, Christie, everyone else in the field right now. Do you believe that to be an accurate reflection of what you're hearing and seeing on the ground among your friends in New Hampshire?
No. I think Nikki Haley is going to perform a lot better in New Hampshire than the polls are showing. A lot of independents are going to come out.
A good percentage of the voters that are undecided, they make up their minds when they're in the voting booth, like right then and there.
So here's the big question. Who are you going to vote for in the primary?
I am heavily leaning towards Nikki Haley.
Likewise.
Ditto.
All Nikki Haley?
Yep.
100% or?
No, it's New Hampshire. It's never 100%.
If you told me a
match.
year ago that I would even be considering Nikki Haley or Chris Christie for that matter, I would tell you are crazy.
So what was it that changed for you?
Going to the town halls, meeting the people in person and actually listening to them.
The candidates' answers to questions at town halls can really swing votes.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
Case in point, this viral moment. Will Nikki Haley lose support after not mentioning slavery in a question about what caused the Civil War? She has since walked back the comments. The three women tell me her answer disappointed them. They're still leaning towards Haley, but in the Granite State, nothing is set in stone.
How powerful is the independent vote in New Hampshire?
It's extremely powerful.
That's a critical vote.
The question is getting them out to vote.
Do you think the fact that Trump is on the ballot again is a motivator to get independent voters showing up in big numbers on January 23rd?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, that's critical.
Emma Barnett, NBC News, Manchester, New Hampshire.
Let's turn now to the Middle East. Israel is stepping up aerial and ground attacks in southern Gaza a day after announcing plans to pull back some of its troops. Israel says it's preparing for a long war against Hamas that would likely stretch all year. The military campaign has killed more than 22,000 Palestinians, according to Gazan health officials, and sparked a devastating humanitarian crisis. It comes as Israel said it would defend itself against accusations of genocide at the International Court of Justice in a case launched by South Africa last week. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Well, even as we're seeing Israel continuing its war in the Gaza Strip, now with nearly 22,000 Palestinians killed, according to the Hamas-run Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip, most of them civilians. Now we're seeing for the first time a direct hit against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself. Now, this was a long time coming over the last several months. This was the issue that had divided Israel before October 7th. Finally, the Supreme Court came out and rejected a signature piece of legislation by Benjamin Netanyahu that would have basically kneecapped the judiciary in favor of the Prime Minister, Netanyahu himself, and the cabinet. They rejected this legislation by a very narrow margin that would have said that that the courts or judges would have the right to exercise a reasonableness clause, essentially saying that legislation or decisions from the cabinet could be rejected by judges if they deemed them to be unreasonable. Now, this sounds like a minor distinction, but this was an issue that had brought hundreds of thousands of Israelis into the streets, particularly in cities like this in Tel Aviv, just off my right shoulder here, for months on end, and it had threatened to cripple Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Now, with October 7th, with the terrorist attacks by Hamas, Benjamin Netanyahu had gone ahead with pushing for this legislation. It had already passed in the Knesset. Now it looks like they're going to have to go back and redraft at least part of this legislation if they hope to see it passed. Now, as I mentioned, all of this going on as the war in the Gaza Strip is still happening. We're still seeing now an expanded footprint of this war as we're now seeing conflicts between the United States and Iran-backed Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Just over the past weekend, the Houthis, among others, reported that 10 of their fighters had been killed in naval battles at the hands of the United States, even as the Houthis were attacking a private commercial vessel. Now, the Houthis have said that 3 of their ships were sunk. All of this as the Iranians have deployed a warship into the Red Sea, significantly escalating tensions well beyond the borders here in Israel.
Matt Bradley, thank you so much.
In the months following Hamas's attack on Israel in October, we've seen tensions spilling over into other communities, even here in the U.S. This morning, we have the story of one Israeli and one Palestinian changing the course of their relationship through conversation and understanding. Here's NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra.
Chocolate hummus is a cultural insult to everybody.
Cooking dinner together in this Harlem apartment is not where Kobe Skolnick
You have olive oil, right?
or Aziz Abu Sara thought they would be. But after 13 years, they're pros at working side by side.
But then we moved it. No, keep it here. Just move this.
Kobe was born to a Jewish Orthodox family in Israel, and Aziz to a Palestinian family in Jerusalem. Together, they became a dynamic duo, leading tours to see their homelands. But all of that came to a sudden stop on October 7th.
I ran a travel company that ran a lot of trips to Israel and Palestine, and now we're running 0 trips there.
Tourism in the region has been slashed since the war between Israel and Hamas began, leaving Kobe and Aziz now giving tours of a different kind, around difficult dialogue here in the United States.
Could the young version of either of you ever imagine being here next to each other right now?
not a chance.
No, Palestinians, for me, I didn't have empathy. I didn't even can look at them.
I grew up with the Palestinian narrative, which, you know, Israel, every Israeli, and even every Jew in the world wants to displace all of us. There's only us versus them.
Today, they're taking that history to discussion events of all kinds. And this night, it's a dinner party.
Today we'll try to say, okay, you're mad. For instance, it's so much pain. What do you want the other side to tell you? So first, welcome everybody again. Thank you for coming for dinner and a gathering.
Kobe and Aziz say while their tours have stopped, their work has doubled.
From what I've heard from a lot of my Muslim sisters this past month is that they're walking on eggshells, that they're afraid to speak their mind.
If we can understand the story and feel the person, we connect over stories. We don't connect over political opinions. I think that can get us somewhere and get us to listen to each other.
Their hope that engaging in tough but civil conversations can move the needle.
We can still sit together and say we don't see each other as enemy. We're not on the opposite side.
What would success look like for you?
Thousands of young people having the courage to talk to the other side in a way that changes the perspectives.
Our thanks to Marissa Parra for that report. Well, it is a rainy start to the new year for the South, with showers in the forecast this week.
That's right. Meteorologist Angie Lastman is here tracking it all for us. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Happy New Year to you. Great to be with you. And we do have a couple of spots that you might want to know about if you're especially heading back to work today. Maybe you've got some errands to run, mainly focused across portions of the South and out west. Let's start with the South. That's where we're tracking a couple of showers that are going to work into parts of Texas through the day today. And eventually, as the day goes on, we'll be dealing with some widespread heavy rain. There's that system. So from Dallas down to Houston, we could see some good substantial rain. The good news with this, we're not looking at severe threat for a lot of folks. We're really going to see that stay on the low end here for the rest of the day today. The system does start to move to the east by tomorrow, though, and that cluster of rain goes with it. It'll move quickly across the southeast. It's a quick moving system. So yes, it'll be packing a punch with some heavy rain at times, but it gets out of the picture quite fast, and it'll be out of the picture by the time we get into day after tomorrow. So good news there, but between now and then, picking up maybe 1 inch to 2 inches of rain here across that region, especially focused across portions along the Gulf Coast, New Orleans included in that. And I mentioned out west, we've got winter alerts that are up for some mountain ranges stretching from California and into into portions of Nevada for folks there. We will see the potential for some heavy rain, some snow, and some wind with this next system. It's going to work into the west coast today from Washington down to California. We'll see rain, we'll see snow, and we could see some difficult travel, especially in those mountainous regions. That's where we'll see the potential for some heavy snow, some wind, and of course those showers will stretch into the southwest by the time we get into tomorrow. The system continues moving a little farther to the east, and it will impact folks in portions of the plains as we get into day after tomorrow. So rainfall amounts, localized amounts are going to be up to about 3 inches, guys. As far as snow totals are concerned, the highest are going to be focused towards the Sierra range. So we'll watch for some folks to start snowboarding and skiing and enjoying it in that way, and everyone else staying home and avoiding the roads.
When I was home in Minnesota, we have this little hill in the Twin Cities. It's literally called Buck Hill. They made snow, and you saw people. No snow around it at all. It was just a little bit of snow. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Angie, thank you. Yeah, see you in a bit.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.